Hello everyone, I'm Milo and welcome to my town. Today's video is one that I really wanted to make, and I had to make it by a certain date, and not just whenever I managed to find some time. Because by the end of this year, the game I will be discussing about in here will no longer be. Today I'll be talking about Tribe 9, about the project as a whole, the game, and the regrettable outcome it ended up facing. So let's begin. Tribe 9 is a multimedia project brought to light as a collaboration between Kazutaka Kodaka's studio, Tokyo Games, and Akatsuki Games, a Japanese developer that focuses on mobile games. I'll admit I didn't really have any idea about Akatsuki prior to this, and even to this day I also don't know a whole bunch about them, but my interest for the project came from Kodaka's involvement on it. For those unaware, he is the creator of titles such as the Danganronpa series, Raincoat, and the recently released handwritten line Last Defense Academy. Overall, I'm a big fan of his works, so his involvement was an instant sell for me, despite the oddity of it. The first announcement of the project came in February 2020, showcasing some sort of sci-fi world with a few characters playing an insanely exaggerated game of baseball, where enhanced gear and even motorcycles were the norm, ending on the name drop for the project, Tribe 9. At this stage, there was hardly anything known about it. Since the baseball was the thing that was shown, many would assume it would be some kind of baseball game. But Kodaka's involvement in it gave me both hope and excitement to see what this would turn out to be. While doing research for this video, I found some translations of an interview from back then, so I wanted to share some key points I read from it. For one, the artist behind most of Kodaka's works, the one behind the flagship Danganronpa style, was also involved here. But they had high expectations for the project, so guest artists were being accepted, which would allow for characters to be more distinct. You may be familiar with how relatively similar Danganronpa characters are in their core design, so they aim to deviate from that for Tribe 9. Among other things, it looks like the original idea was truly massive, already considering how it would expand into other media, and the size of the entire project would be unlike what they had ever worked on. Fast forward to 2021, and a few announcements came, such as officially revealing that the game would be a 3D action RPG, as before it hadn't been specified at all how it would be. A trailer was released showcasing characters from some of the different tribes. At the same time, the multimedia expansion began, as they announced an anime that would serve as a prequel to the game and would air in 2022. I think I was slightly aware of the anime's existence back then, but I wasn't all into the news, so it slid my radar, and I only got to see it up until this year. As for how it is, well, a bit hard to say for me. I'll admit I enjoyed it, but I also ended up watching it only a little bit after the game actually released, which I was already liking. Watching the anime here gave me both the prelude to the scenario seen in the game, but it also let me see some of the characters from it in action, allowing me to learn and understand them more. The anime itself is pretty much all about baseball, just be warned about that. But I would indeed recommend watching it. It was a fun time. Back on our timeline of events, I'm not certain when, but a webtoon for Tribe 9 had also happened. From my understanding, it is simply a slight retelling of the anime. Then at one point during 2023, more news were finally shared about the core project, the game itself. A teaser trailer was released. I don't think it's explicitly said to be in-engine, but in this one we could see more detailed models of the characters, that are definitely the ones we saw in the actual release. No proper gameplay was shown, but it gave a glimpse into what we would likely see once we got our hands on the game itself. We also got more detailed information about the release platforms, which would be for mobile and PC. A year later in 2024, we finally got a big chunk of juicy details for the actual outcome of the game. A gameplay trailer was released alongside the Steam page for the game. Finally, we could see the proper gameplay of it. Also, probably one of the most defining and controversial statements was revealed. The game was to be a live service, free-to-play, gacha game. And this is the piece of news that may have shaken up a lot of people's expectations on the game, since a lot of people have a very firm stance on not even getting close to games of this type. For me personally, while I found the choice questionable, I still pretty much liked what I was seeing and was eagerly awaiting to try it out for myself. After all, Kodaka was involved. During 2024, 2 beta tests were conducted. The first one happened around July, requiring an invitation to access it. I wasn't chosen back then, so I didn't get the chance to experience that earlier build of the game. Then in October, as part of the Steam Next Fest event, a deadly demo was made available for everyone. They said it was an updated version of the closed beta test. This time I finally got to try it out. I got the initial feel for the story and some of its gameplay, and boy, was I totally in. I really liked what I saw. I didn't end up playing too much of the demo, as they did state that no data would carry over to the final game, and the initial prologue actually took me several hours to get through. So, having been convinced on the game, I cut my time with it a bit short. For those who played it, I only got to the part after the first XP game ended. Anyway, I think that mostly covers the story behind the project and the game as a whole. After the beta tests, the team gathered feedback from players and went to polish things up, to finally release to the public on February 20th, 2025, exactly 5 years after its original announcement. So let me talk about the actual game now. I'll try my best to just cover the basics without extending too much on the details. The story happens about 2 years after the anime's conclusion, where an almighty individual called Zero has forcibly taken control of the cities of Neo-Tokyo, forbidding travel between them and enacting governing rules that fundamentally affected the life of each of the cities. The main protagonist is Yoku Ronak, a newly introduced character who had been brainwashed and given amnesia by Zero, forgetting his former life and being incomplete for the past 2 years. A rebellious group called Trash Tribe comes to rescue him from Zero's grasp, and once they're back on the surface, they take Zero's offer of participating in Extreme Games, or XG, to go against the governing rules of each city and confront Zero himself. That is the basic premise of the story. I felt it was necessary to introduce it before talking about the game mechanics. As I alluded to earlier, the game describes itself as an extreme 3D action RPG. The gameplay is mainly split into 3 distinct types. First is the world exploration. The different chapters were separated into distinct cities, each based around one of Tokyo's 23 special worlds. Each city has its own type of atmosphere that is portrayed in a 2.5D world, with the environment itself being 3-dimensional on a slight top-down view, and the characters and certain elements appear in sprite versions of themselves. This contrast looks very good in my opinion, and bridges over in the few instances of games such as Danganronpa, where they featured sprite art for the characters, while letting the world shine on its own as a 3D map. On this exploration phase, you move through each of the cities, finding paths to progress through them, while looting containers and treasure chests for resources, and solving puzzles to unlock more treasures or the path forward. Each chapter also had several NPCs that would hand out quests, some of which were recurrent in the same and even future cities, which helped build a sense of identity for the world, as you could form these small bonds with the characters. You could also see more nameless characters that would have smaller flavored text all around the cities, which helped to augment the world building. They would even change once the main story for the chapter was completed, further increasing this aspect. There was this Zero Stamp Book feature, which would house multiple objectives. As you completed them in each city, you would both increase the level cap of your characters and also would be allowed to explore in areas that initially required a specific amount of stamps to proceed, allowing the game to mark progression through certain areas that may hold a higher challenge, including moving over to the next city. The second main type of gameplay is the battles. Throughout the city, there will be a bunch of enemies patrolling that will be alerted to your presence. Once engaged, the world would shift into a proper 3-dimensional arena, where your 3 party member characters will be thrown into battle with the enemies you engaged. Detailing deep into the battle system would take too long, so I'll simply cover the basics. Every character has access to a primary, secondary, and a third attack that they dub the strategy skill. On top of this, they each have access to a specific gauge unique to them. For some, you feel it as you fight, for others, it begins filled and depletes as the battle goes on. As you deal damage, you may eventually break the enemies, allowing you to enlist your chain attack skills, which will charge the tension gauge, which at different numbers going from 1 to 3 each of the character's ultimate skills will be enabled to be used, subsequently depleting the amount of tension that it requires. Then there is a tension card system. These cards have illustrations and stories to them, which increase the lore of the world for those who read them. But also they work as an equipment system to modify how you approach the battles, as each of them provides an effect that can modify the way you build and use your characters and teams. The characters themselves can have their ranks increased, which grant them potential gems that you can use to invest into different stats, or passives that also modify the way that you use them in battle. As you explore, you'll also find other equipment types called compatible monsters. These will have a type and up to 3 stats that can further boost you. Trying to match good boosts with your characters will make them stronger in the respective roles. Well, that was an incredibly concise summary of the battle system, just to give an overview for the video's purpose. The final type of gameplay found in the game is... oh, right. Remember when this game was about baseball? At certain points within the stories of each chapter, Trash Tribe will have to confront their opponents in the way they know best, on a match of extreme baseball, or XP for short. While you are technically playing baseball, these segments are pretty much this game's versions of Danganronpa's non-stop debates. You and your opponents will pretty much be engaged in a discussion as the game progresses, and at specific points you'll have to refute the statements with a good response, for which you'll be able to choose from a 3x3 grid that also denotes where you'll hit or aim the ball at. Choosing the right answer, on top of a good location that will benefit the plays from your allies on the field, will be the key to progress and win the XP games. I really enjoyed how they implemented XP. I suppose I've not yet mentioned it at all, but these baseball matches are literally played using the entire city as a playing field. That's what makes them extreme. While some of the characters do have baseball-inspired weapons they use, the battles themselves don't carry anything from the sport. Having an actual XP bout as part of the gameplay in both playing and narrative was pretty ingenious in my opinion. Now it's time for the bonus round. After completing the second chapter of the story, 2 new aspects unlock. The first is PvP XP. There's a place in the game where you can go to have XP matches against the teams set up by other players. You'll be directly playing against their units, which carry the stats of their levels and equipment, translated into XP stats. It was originally called Ranked XP, but it only got 2 seasons before the ranked playlist got terminated, which is a shame because with that method you'd get random opponents to play against. You can still play against other people after that, but you need to add them to your follow list and select their teams. A little inconvenient. The other activity can technically be considered the post-game area, as weird as it sounds for a live service game. It's called Fractal Vice, located within Zero's own city fortress, built by him for us, for some reason. The area itself underwent a rework when the third chapter released, but in general terms, it serves as a location with increasingly higher level enemies, even more than the maximum you can find in the main chapters, that also hosts the strongest equipment tiers in the game. So it served as a place to farm the best possible combinations of stats for your compatible monsters. By the way, since this game had gacha mechanics, you had to obtain the cards through the banners, but actually, they did something really cool. Initially, the game sets you up with a full 3-member party by default. This team, while not the most powerful, is completely capable of clearing all of the content in the game. Of course, you may want to experiment and try out different characters, and here is when the guest system would shine. Basically, as you play through the story, certain characters would accompany the main party. These characters, if not owned, would be counted as guests, which you could actually set to your party and use. You could not customize or level them, they'd be set to a specific level and a state based on your current progression, but it allowed you to try them out before probably obtaining a copy of them. This is how I first got to use the character who became my favorite and main unit in the game, so this mechanic was greatly appreciated. Even if you did own units, collecting duplicates of them also wasn't all that necessary. If you got some, then you could transcend them and have them earn more passive boosts and potential gems, but their base forms were good enough on their own. Another very important point to mention is that unlike with many gacha games where you can only play so much per day before you reach some sort of drop or energy cap, Tribe 9 had nothing stopping you from playing as much as you wanted. The best way to gather resources was by using boosters, a type of currency, to access mini dungeons called rifts. And boosters could drop from regular enemies, so for those who wanted, they totally could go all out and grind to their heart's content. A lot of people praised this design and did not hold back. Now I've truly finished talking about the core gameplay to the best of my abilities. I could go on in detail, but it's not my aim for this video. As I mentioned at the very beginning, this game will no longer be by the end of this year. And this is due to the fact that on the 15th of May of 2025, just shy from the third month mark from release, the game was announced to be ending its service on November 27th, 2025. With this announcement, they immediately halted all ways to purchase microtransactions from within the game, and immediately cancelled any future content that was to be released. It's worth noting that a month before this, they had posted a content roadmap for the following 3 months. Nothing of what was listed there would be released anymore. It really did stink, because the banner for the first character of Chapter 3 had just ended and nothing replaced it on the day before. And when they announced a maintenance on the night of the 14th, we thought that the next character was coming, which mind you was already playable as a guest during the Chapter 3 story, meaning that he was complete. But we were robbed from both him and anything else that would have followed. For this next segment, I want to talk about all the things that led to this outcome, and detail a timeline of events from the good and the bad, starting from release to the announcement of end of service and what lies beyond. Firstly, let me talk in more detail about the gacha system in this game. I will mention that I am not a gacha player. I saw this term being thrown around so much over the discourse around the game, and I was a bit perplexed about it. Turns out there are people out there that actively seek out gacha-styled, free-to-start games to play on most of the spare time. And when they get bored of the games or they are closed, they jump to the next one. The content felt really alien to me, as someone who mainly plays single-player, story-driven games. Of course, I have played a few gacha games before, but mainly the Lovely ones and Mario Kart Tour, which isn't even a gacha anymore. And in those there was a great variety of items to obtain from pulling in the banners, so in pale comparison, Tribe 9 was different as it had a smaller roster of characters. So with that said, how did the gacha work in this game? When it first released, players were bashing it for being extremely bad, so let's go over it. The way it works is based on a per banner basis. There were 2 banners in total, a standard one and an event one, which would focus on the newest 3-star character alongside 2 of the 2-stars. The original rates, now that I am reading them, are indeed extremely low. Since what we cared the most about was getting the highest rated stuff, the 3 stars, the rate for them was a measly 0.6%, out of which only half of it would get you the featured character unit. The other half was left to whatever else existed in the pool of options. Yikes, that is pretty bad. When I played Love Live Safe, if I recall correctly, the UR card rate was around 1% originally, and for the next game CFAS, it was 5%. Anyway, pulling 10 at once instead of singles guaranteed a 2-star or above, which could be characters or tension cards. Yes, both were in the banners at once. This of course meant that you were mostly getting 1-star tension cards, which most weren't that useful. If you kept pulling without getting any 3-star item, a pity number would keep increasing, capping at the 80 mark. Something I actually didn't know at all is that when reaching the pity, you weren't actually guaranteed the featured unit. I was unable to find the original rate, but it looks like eventually got changed to 75% chance of getting the featured 3-star, with a remaining 25% of getting whatever else. When I learned about this, it really baffled me. Coming from games like Mario Kart Tour, where you knew for certain that the featured items were somewhere in the stack of 100 items in a banner, or in CFAS where the PD system was literally you manually purchasing the desired card after hitting a specific amount of balls. The fact that even after pulling the PD rate it still wasn't a guarantee just left me a bit speechless. And it didn't actually happen to me, so it took me a while for me to even learn it. After a massive backlash from the low rates, 1 week after release, they announced one of the most interesting things I've ever seen a developer of this type do. They said they were going to increase the overall rates to be better, and on top of that, a few days later when they patched the game to incorporate that, they would be refunding every single spent currency used on gacha banners up until that point. And that was insane news. I had personally just for fun spent my currency recently, and I made sure to go as low as possible before that patch, which left me with the equivalent of 10 multi-pools after the update. And I had managed to get what I had wanted up until that point, which meant that I could save all that refunded currency for the future. This was just one of the good changes that came from the game that made it feel like all was in the right track. Let me list some of the others. Early on, they increased the amount of free currency you could get from the daily missions, allowing you to earn the amount of a single pool per day. They increased the currency earned from certain in-game challenges and added gacha medals for them and for side quests. They completely reworked the tension card system, as the original actively consumed your gauge every time a card activated, and allowed for very infrequent ultimate uses in battle. And they allowed for using 3 boosters at once to multiply rewards on rifts, considerably shortening the material farming time. These are only some of the many quality of life updates we got while the game actually updated. They also held multiple login promotions which gave out more and more gacha currency, and even added side events, like a Muse Dash inspired rhythm event called Lux Phantasma. If you were on the point of view of a player, you were only thriving and getting so much enjoyment out of the game, that it felt like nothing could go wrong. But in truth, things were looking a little bit grim on the outside. Turns out that the game wasn't doing all that great financially. I don't know if I'll show any exact figures, but past the release window, it massively plummeted down. Not even the 3rd chapter's release really changed that outlook. And it's not that hard to know the reason why. As I've alluded to so many times in the video, the game was insanely generous. Not only did they give out a lot of currency for campaigns, but every single maintenance also gave compensation, just for having a game offline for a few hours. On top of that, the currency refund 2 weeks into the game really cemented a precedent. For free-to-plays, they would likely have enough currency to get the first featured character, and after the refund, they could use those savings for the next one, and subsequently save more for the following one after it. Then, on the other side of the fence, for players willing to pay, they could purchase some currency before the refunds, spend everything and reap their rewards, and then be set for several months as their balance surged in their accounts. The fact of the matter is that there was almost no incentive to be spending money when considering both of these scenarios. Most players were swimming in currency ready for future banners. Another factor that I kept hearing a lot was a severe lack of marketing. To be honest, if it wasn't because of my interests that already had me looking forward to this project, hearing about the game would have been hard. I do believe they focused a lot of their efforts on the Japanese side, but it lacked a lot of exposure overseas. I do know they held a few giveaway campaigns in the English socials, but they also were limited to just US, which probably made residents of other regions not even participate, as they weren't going to have any chances at it. I'd known, as I was one of them. I should mention that retaining players could also have been affected due to the difficulty of the game. In truth, certain parts were actually pretty hard. The main area boss that I encountered halfway through the first chapter was actually a pretty big filter for a lot of people, and after some updates it was actually made easier, but I could totally see some players initially dropping after just a few attempts, if they weren't all that hooked on the game already. Anyways, you can see now that there was some struggle that could easily be observed. Despite my great enjoyment of the game, I initially never considered to spend money on it at all. I have a big dislike of microtransaction monetization in games, but the fact that this game had them did not subtract my enjoyment of it. And heck, why would it when I too was thriving and enjoying it without paying a single cent? Though as the weeks went on and I saw the situation, I said I'd pitch in with financial support only if they released something that actually caught my eye. And guess what? They did. I haven't mentioned it so far, but the game had a battle pass system of sorts, called the support contract. This pass had 70 tiers of both free and a premium track. If you bought the premium version, which could only be done with paid currency, it would give you a few select exclusives, like outfits for 3 characters, mystery boxes that granted random rewards, and an exclusive tension card. Overall, with the first one we got, it didn't really seem worth it at all, despite it having an outfit for Gotanda, my favorite character. I didn't actually like that one so much, so I never even considered it. When they unveiled the second one, however, it showed a very sleek looking outfit for the character Q, reminiscing of his suit from the anime, and 2 for the upcoming characters. It was actually very cool indeed, and after thinking about it for weeks, I decided to actually get it. I put enough money in the game to let me buy that pass, and another pass that would grant me additional currency for 1 month. Then my remaining balance would be enough to purchase a future support contract that I may enjoy. All in all, that was only about $12, so not that much, and I was happy to be supporting this game I had been enjoying for the past 2 months. Unfortunately, looks like it wasn't enough, as the very next week is when they announced the end of service. Since that support contract contained an outfit for a character that wouldn't even be released anymore, they ended up refunding the paid entities used to purchase the pass to anyone who did so. On top of that, they also announced 2 rounds of refund policies they would enact. First, they would refund all purchases made after they published the roadmap of the content in April. Again, since over half of the content listed in there would no longer see the light of day. The initial period for applying for these refunds happened in July, and as I'm recording this, they should be processing the refunds for those who applied in that month. I'll have a text on screen showing if I got it already or not. The second policy they announced was to issue a refund for every unspent paid currency that remained in a player's account at the time of termination. This will still take a while to happen, but that's their compromise to players. Funny enough, I'm going to end up with more money that I put into the game, since my $12 purchase was indeed done after that roadmap. And on top of all that, I still have almost all the paid entities that I ever owned, so that too will be refunded to me later. After the end of service announcement, the game was left in a pretty bleak state. The support contract button no longer gave anything, ranked XP simply vanished, and the event tab slowly lost all the listings it had, and nothing else got added to the game. Only an in-game button to issue the refund process. Not even a banner with all the units was added, leaving Tsuruko, Kazuki, and Hinagiku, the 3 limited units, completely unobtainable. Even if you did get them before, they never added any in-game methods of transcending them without dupes, so you're also stuck with them the way they were. This sucked as I aimed for the hardest challenges in the game, and while I did succeed in them, having those extra abilities would have made my task a bit easier. Only the regular banner was left available in the event. It's the general understanding that the entire team that worked on the game was completely disbanded. While I've mentioned plenty that Kodaka from Tokyo Games was part of this project, actually the game part was mostly done by Akatsuki. Kodaka had mostly laid out the story and scenario. So on the game operation side, it was all Akatsuki. Therefore, most likely everyone worked on the game simply got assigned to other operations. I sure hope they weren't actually fired, though given their Japanese, I doubt this is the case. Still, it's not difficult to see the passion and dedication that the developers truly had for the game that they had crafted, and even more after doing the research for this video and seeing all the previous work that went into the entire project, which makes it even sadder to have it all end up this way. It's very evident that these choices were led by the financial state that's controlled by the corporate side. And if it made no profit, they opted just to trash it than to continue to try and salvage it. It is very unfortunate, but I think one of the biggest mistakes that the game had as a whole was aiming to be a live service gacha game. A lot of people believe that had it been a full release, most of these things would not have happened. But unfortunately, I think it was baked into the core of it from early on. Thankfully, the future is looking a bit brighter these days, and I'm a bit thankful I was busy enough to not have done this video earlier, so I'll be able to share this here. First, after the end of service announcement, the developers promised to release the story they had so far for next few chapters, and on July 10th, they put together a website detailing the story scripts for the side story of chapter 3 and the stories for chapters 4 and 5. They say they took some effort to present them in a decent way, having a few of the graphics and art they would have shown in game. I haven't had the chance to read them myself just yet, but I hope to do so soon. They were only released in Japanese, as they likely didn't manage to get through localization, but a few fan groups have already put their efforts into translating them. I will link a few in the description. Since I haven't read them yet, I can't say much about them, but they look to feature new interesting characters, as well as finally getting to see some of the other characters from the anime in the Taito tribe. But a few weeks back, the Tribe 9 community saw a light, brighter than anything since that fateful day in May. On August 1st, on his own Twitter account, Kazutaka Kodaka republished a statement from a brand new account, One Neo Neon Tribe. In short, it's a group established by Kodaka himself, Shuhei Yamaguchi, a director and producer for the game, and Katsunori Suginaka, one of the writers. Together, they created the Neon Tribe as a doujin circle, with the intention of taking the reins and continuing the story of Tribe 9. They plan to do it as a pure passion project for the love of the art, which means that they'll work on it on their free and spare time, and also release it for free for the fans. Initially, they aim to release it as a web content, but they could pursue other ways to bring their vision into fruition. Since it would be done whenever they find the time, we do not have any established timelines, and the best way we can support them in this endeavor would be to support their other works, which will benefit them tangentially. I cannot tell you how happy I was when I saw those posts. I really did love everything that Tribe 9 had built, and the end of service announcement really bummed me out. I had kept small hopes for someone to pick it up down the line, but I never anticipated for it to come this soon and from this source. While it may really take a good while before we see its results, having that prospect be confirmed makes me happy enough. And that would be the end of this story for now. That is the turbulent tale of the Tribe 9 project. Where we stand now, the game's servers will be active for about 3 additional months. And if you were engaged in what I talked about in this video so far, please, I implore you to try it out while you can. The game is free, after all. You can see all of the story that was crafted into it and experience the gameplay alongside. I think it's worth playing just to satisfy your curiosity. As for myself, I haven't stopped playing once in all this time. While most days I simply do my daily missions and call it there, I did work towards beating the most difficult challenges in the game, and I'm still working towards some other personal goals that I'll simply want to fulfill. It's just the way I like to enjoy the game, and I know I'll pride myself on doing them later when it's actually gone. I'm planning to hold a livestream for the final moments of the game, so if you swing by the channel when it turns into November 27th Japan time, then I'll most likely be spending my final minutes with it live. And with that, I can feel confident in ending this video. I wanted to both share the story of this project and convince more people to join what remains of it, and I sure hope I've managed to do so with this. I had made a video on the game before, and I have done several live streams so far, with a few more still on my mind for the near future, so hopefully you can also check them out. For now, all I can say is play on. Don't forget to always be welcome in my town. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.